Hello, how is everybody doing? It's Tobisonics here, and it is Monday, April the 5th. And this video should have happened around about January the 20th, when my latest release, Eye of the Storm, came out. And the idea was that I was going to talk to you a little bit about the release, a little bit about the production, some of the ideas behind it, yada, yada, yada. And it's been such a hectic couple of months with promotion and everything that it kind of fell through the cracks for about 10 weeks. So apologies to Music of the Future, and apologies to Gemma over at Music of the Future, and thank you for your patience. So the last time that I spoke to you guys, I just released my debut solo production. After doing a bunch of remixes, I did my solo production, all these things, and that was back at the beginning of 2020. So that was a year ago, give or take. It was about a year or so. And at the time, just as I released it, I got a bunch of mastering work coming in, which is the day job. That's right, I make things louder for a living. And I just didn't have enough time to really give it any promotion because I was doing all the mastering stuff. And in fact, so it didn't really do so much. And I always kind of felt bad about that I didn't really give it its fair shot.
Future's bright, that's the neon lights. Demolition man, put your dreams on ice. Said it's going down if they're seen on sight. Countdown started and we leave tonight.
Then, of course, COVID happened and the pandemic and lockdown and all of that. And, everybody was out of their mind with stress and worry, and none of us knew what was going on. And it was in that context, in that first week of lockdown here in Luxembourg, which I think is like a week earlier than you went in the UK. I think we were a little bit quicker. That I started working on Eye of the Storm. And originally what I wanted to do was I wanted it to be this kind of big, kind of crowd-pleasing, kind of feel-good, kind of 80s, kind of just massive, cathartic, kind of therapeutic track. I described it as imagine the car from Back to the Future, but now instead of a DeLorean, it's an Imperial Star Destroyer. That's what I wanted it to sound like.
Worked an undersold, couldn't see the signal, said the plan went up in smoke. 7 with the double O, but by the difference is the city that they living in. Hoping for deliverance, but never get evidence.
And the kind of core production, the fundamental of it came together pretty quickly. It came together like 3 or 4 days or something, or 3 or 4 sessions, and that's pretty much what you hear, like the core kind of loops and the additional MIDI instruments and a lot of the effects were put together very, very quickly. And it kind of worked, which is always a bad sign when demos sound good, because you know you're stuffed. And then, as happens, I got a bunch of mastering work that came in, and I had to leave it alone for a couple of months.
Future's bright, that's the neon lights. Demolition man, put your dreams on ice. Said it's going down if they're seen on sight. Countdown started and we leave tonight.
And I think it wasn't until May that I got it to a stage where I thought it was good enough to approach a London-based rapper and poet that I know called Costi. I thought it was good enough to sort of send it to him and say, how about you try putting down some words on this, without wasting his time.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Eye of the Storm had taken so long to get to that stage that in the meantime I'd actually released another single called Military Industrial Complex. And Military Industrial Complex was made in response to the BLM protests. And I took President Eisenhower's farewell address to the nation in 1961, where he first coined the phrase military industrial complex, and I juxtaposed it with President Trump's response to the BLM protests. Artistically, I think military industrial complex was successful. But in terms of its application, in a sense, it failed, because all it ended up doing really was preaching to the choir.
Today, I have strongly recommended to every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets.
So in the backdrop to all that, I was finishing off Eye of the Storm, and I decided, rather than trying to ask a question like I had done with military industrial complex, that instead I would talk about hope. Because it was the one thing that extremists at either end of the political spectrum, doesn't matter whether it's left or right, it's the one thing that they can't traffic in. It's the one thing they can't really offer people. They talk hope, but ultimately what they are fatalistic, antagonistic, divisive. There is no hope to what they're doing. There is no future to what they're doing. Everything they do will end in death.
Future's bright, that's the neon lights. Demolition man, put your dreams on ice. Said it's going down if they're seen on sight. Countdown started and we leave tonight.
President Kennedy's inauguration speech was sort of rolling around in my head. And I was very nervous about the idea of using what is arguably the greatest political speech of all time. But I dropped it into the production. For Eye of the Storm, and even at that point where it wasn't timed right, and it was overlapping horribly into the chorus, and it was really very messy. Even like that, it just worked. And in doing so, my hope is that it will remind people of a time when we genuinely believed that we could be one race of humans, that we could be a global people.
Countdown started and we leave tonight.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
The future's bright, that's the neon lights. Demolition man, put your dreams on ice. Said it's going down if they're seen on sight. Countdown started and we leave tonight.
My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
So that was a year in the life of Tobisonics. I hope that was vaguely interesting. Thank you all for watching and for listening. A huge thank you to MusicOTFuture and to Gemma.
Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-boo.